Welcome, data people. We are Zuma. My name is Matt, and this is the Data for Good podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Zuma. Zuma is a dedicated recruitment company focusing on data positions across Berlin. The Data for Good podcast is for the world of data science, analytics, and engineering, giving you a platform to hear the thoughts and opinions of data leaders from Berlin and beyond. Today, we are joined by Leandro Leite, head of People and Data Analytics at Klarna. Leandro, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Matt. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm very, very well, very well. Let's get straight into it. Let's get into the episode. It's a very relevant topic right now. People analytics. So let's start from the basics. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's, as I said, it's a very frequent question, Matt. People get curious when we say we're doing people analytics. And I think this question always comes because I think HR kind of came a little bit late to the game of data and analytics, but it got very hot recently, right? Because companies realize the impact that it can make in the organization, right? So people analytics is basically using workforce data to improve the quality of decisions that you make about people management, right? And workforce data can be can include the basics, right? You start with like, what are your employee demographics? What are your engagement survey results? What is your performance data? What is your absence data, and so on? But it can also include very sophisticated data sources, like what is your internal communication logs, right? And you look how people communicate inside your company. What are the interactions in social media, like Glassdoor, for example? What are the things, the ratings your employee experience gets? And usually the goals of people analytics is to create a more data-driven organization in terms of people management, and with that improve the well-being of the employees, make the teams more productive, make the teams more diverse, and also like share these insights with leaders so they can learn, right, what actually works and what doesn't work when you are managing people.
I think a lot of people will be cautious. They will think that it's a bit like Big Brother and they're being watched. But in reality, it's not really that, is it?
Yeah, it scares some people. That's true. I would say that most of the data we use is data that it's already available on the company. So all the things that are actually mandatory for an employee to be engaged in a employment contract is something that it will be already there. And then, of course, you have all the data that is provided by the employee, and the general motivation of both the employee and the company is to make the employee more engaged and improve the well-being of the employees and so on. So when an employee is, for example, answering to an engagement survey, I believe it is in the general interest of the employees to make the company a better place to work, right? And our work is then to use this data to actually achieve this goal, right? To make the company a better place to work. So definitely don't go into watching anyone, at least not on my experiences. It goes over like how you what understanding what actually works when it comes to people management and what actually creates results. And I would say it's very good when you shift to a data-driven approach, right? Because the opposite is quite bad. The opposite is like managers making decisions on the gut feeling about people, and you definitely don't want this, right? You want the managers to be based on data, on how they engage their teams and how they make their teams more productive.
Yes, these decisions are being made anyway, so it's better to have an informed decision and have as much information at hand as possible to make the best decision, not only for the individual but for the company as well. Is it always
Exactly, yeah.
anonymous? It's not sensitive data that's ever been used.
So, well, we first of all, in my team, we treat everything as sensitive data. So it's like any data input we have, it's considered sensitive. But we obviously we have different grades, right, or different levels of sensitivity, and that's actually one huge part of the work is actually dealing with sensitive data and how you share it. Because I think a little bit different from other data teams is if you have sensitive data of customers or something like this, you usually have a few users with very privileged access that get access to that.
Yeah.
Of the organization has a denied access. When it comes to people analytics, everyone needs a slice of it. So if you are a manager, you actually need sensitive data of your team only. Or if you are managing the company on that country, you actually need information of employees on that country. So there is a big work on slicing the data to the right people and giving the right permissions. And then the principle we always use is like, it's actually a GDPR principle, right? This is not something we came up with, is like, what is the real purpose of usage of that data, right? So if let's take, for example, absence data, which is something very sensitive. So people are going on leave for their personal reasons, and sometimes you have information about who is sick or who is in parental leave and so on. So someone that's trying to understand the absences on the company level, does this person needs to know the exact individual reasons for leaves? Probably not. This person can work with an aggregated level. And the same goes, for example, for engagement surveys that the important thing is not what you responded, right? The important thing is there is a pressing issue that it's being talked by a lot of people, and let's understand what is actually going on this. So we always try to get to the highest level of anonymization of the data, so we get only to the point that is needed for the business to have insights, right? Otherwise, it's quite. I mean, this is the law. First of all, GDPR is there and it's telling us. And second, it's just not ethic, right? That you use this data for anything else that is not the purpose of making the company a better place to work.
So if we were to put a use case for that, say sick days, you wouldn't be able to find out or work with an individual's sick days. But for example, if you had a team sick days and the reason was burnout, for example, then you'd be able to improve that on a macro level without being super sensitive on an individual's reasons.
Exactly. And let's say, like one easy case, let's say you have a lot of burnout cases going on, right? This is definitely a problem that the company needs to look at and try to understand, okay, is there anything that the management is doing that is driving to this? Like, just are we putting goals that are not feasible? Are we treating employees not in a fair way? But you don't need to know the people exactly who had a case of burnout, but you need to monitor, okay, we have several people or several cases that are popping up. And you need also to be able to aggregate with some other variables, right? So you identify, oh, actually the cases are happening on this team or in this division, so there's something wrong here that we need to tackle, right? So definitely always start from the aggregated high level and only go down if it's absolutely necessary. And of course, the people that are dealing with the data itself are very trained on this. This is something that I make very clear when then onboarding someone to the team who doesn't have experience in people analytics, the first thing we do is to go through this process of getting maturity to actually see this data, right? Because at the end, you end up seeing a lot of sensitive things. So you need to first get the maturity on how you actually need to deal with it, right?
And for this data to be valuable, you need to have that trust in place so that the information, sensitive information being provided is as true as possible. So how do you install that level of trust with the employees to make sure you can get the most value out of this kind of data?
Yeah. Well, first of all, GDPR again. It's we actually need their consent when we are using any type of data. So we have in the data privacy policy that the data that is used in engagement surveys, for example, is something we will use for improve the quality of the management decisions and so on. So this is all agreed and signed on. And the second thing, I think it's really showcasing what can happen, right? So the engagement survey is a good example. There's one thing I always like to do is like every time we launch a new engagement survey, we try to remember employees what were outcomes of the past engagement surveys. Right. So and then we say, thanks to the past engagement surveys, these are the things that the management did in the past, right? And then it comes things like improve certain benefits or improved compensation policy or change the ways of working. So people really get to see, oh, okay, so being honest here and sharing my true answers, my true feelings actually makes an impact and makes the company better, right? Like to show this by showcasing how the data could be used.
And this is just kind of one use case. How else could we leverage data within people analytics that's maybe not obvious to most people?
Yeah. Well, there are actually many use cases, right? We mentioned here the engagement surveys and absence data, right? You also have data. So in Klarna, for example, we have something we call our operating model, which is kind of set of guidelines and I wouldn't say rules, but yeah, more on the guidelines on how the teams should operate and how they should collaborate and so on. And we have a lot of KPIs to check how the teams are following the operating model or not. And that help us to understand, for example, we like to make retros every 2 weeks. Is this something that's useful for all the teams, and are they really doing it? Does it create value for them, or is just something that we recommend but is actually not being used or not creating value? So this is one thing, right? We have things. One thing that I like a lot is to look at the leadership KPIs. So how are leaders actually doing on your company? And that's I think that's nice because it twists a little bit, because people usually assume you are only controlling, or not controlling, but they are looking at individual contributors, but actually the managers get also a level of scrutiny, right? And to see, are they setting structures that are healthy, and then do they have a good span of control, and like how much time they spend with their contributors and so on. So these are all things you can look at. And many other things. You can look at compensation, obviously, like see how fair compensation is being treated, and how diversity is playing a role in it. If you are really if you don't have any any bias on how you make decisions, how you promote people, and I mean, I know in the tech sector this is a very pressing issue, right? That the gender inequality is something we see all the time, and that the data really helps us to understand, like, is this really a bias against a certain gender, or is it just is it something compared to the market? Is it how we can improve, right? These are things we see every day.
Because it's not just the data, it's how we can use this data to enforce our beliefs, and that gender diversity, especially in engineering, for example, that the closer that is to 50-50, the higher performing the teams are. So it's recording and proving that the theories are true.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
One question that I'm curious about is the kind of infrastructure and how you collect the data and analyze analyze the data.
Yeah. Well, it's not very different from other analytics teams, to be honest. So we usually rely on, usually the main source of data is a system called an HRIS. So an example of an HRIS is Workday, for example, which is I think the most well known on the tech sector at the moment. So this is the system that will have the basics, right? All the employee demographics and so on. And there is we in Klarna in particularly, we take data out of it. So we have integrations to push data from Workday to our AWS storage. Mm-hmm. And then from AWS, we would use ClickSense as our BI tool, right? So our data visualization tool. And this is the basic flow, right? Taking data from the ATM or the HRIS, putting on some, in our case, in our data lake and AWS. So we have our data there, and then you get this into a data visualization tool. But the challenge on people analytics is that we also like to use various sources. So we have actually, I think at the moment, 8 or 9 systems that we take data from. And then it goes like, we take data from Jira, for example, because we like to analyze what is the flow of tickets going to specific teams and how are teams responding to this ticket and so on. We take data from our ATS, which is the recruitment system, right? And we see how the recruitment process is actually linked to the employee success later on. And then you need to, one part that's quite challenging is how you link the candidates with the employees later on. It can a lot of inconsistencies can arise when you, so there is a lot of data engineering work to make this happen. And then we get data from logs from the office, for example, to see how, especially after COVID started and the remote work started more, to see what is like, how many people are actually coming to the office. Like in Klarna, we are actually not obliged to come to the office, but we have it. And then we like to see how many people are actually coming. Are the people actually meeting in the office and so on? So we have like logs of the infrastructure of the office, and all this goes to AWS, and then we visualize and click. This is how we work currently.
Yeah, so it's a proper setup, and I know that Klarna invests a lot in this infrastructure, and it is very important and gets you a seat at the table. I guess it sounds like you're really impacting decisions off the back of this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's important. I mean, we definitely rely on the Klarna overall data structure and data team, right? So they have put the foundations for the people analytics to rely on. But then the challenge is like everything we do needs to be a little bit separate, because we have all the sensitive data that we need to keep as in a closed place. So we kind of, in many cases, we kind of replicate what we have in the central data infrastructure. We kind of create a small instance where we have exactly the same, but then it's locked only for us, right? Only for the people with privileged access to it.
And it sounds like sometimes the insights that you find are not always the insights that you want, and there can be some difficult conversations to share. Can you tell us a little bit about the difficult conversations?
Yeah. I mean, I would say getting the insights is usually I wouldn't say it is the easy part, but is the easiest one compared with actually getting into action. Because this is definitely an area that involves a lot of the intuition that people have, right? So managers, especially if we say that it's a quite new area, and we say people have been managing people so far without people analytics, right? So it's now sometimes hard to get the trust and to really say, okay, this is actually what the data is showing, and then challenge what actually what managers are doing, right? Or challenge what leads has been doing for years, right? This is definitely not an easy discussion. It's not particular to Klarna at all. I mean, I have seen many places, and usually it is, you go on small steps, right? So you can't just show up and try to change the whole way of managing of the leadership with on your first analysis, but you need to then gain trust and come up with good insights, good ideas. So you definitely, one thing I like a lot, and it's quite hard to do it, is like to experiment is also something you can do. So start small and some places of the organization and see how the results come and so on. So this is something we definitely need to do, and I think it's not very different from any other analytics team, right? If you go to CRM analytics, I think they are also usually start experimenting something and see how customers answer to it. I think, and people analytics is the same, right? Just that you have some legal boundaries and some limitations, but actually the method of getting your hypothesis, testing your hypothesis with data, setting some experiments to see if your tests make sense. I think it's all there. It's all what we try to do, and then try to gain this trust from managers. Yep.
Yeah, I think naturally analytical people who work in analytics are very curious people. When you talk about kind of analytics in CRM, it's customers or clients, people that you don't necessarily meet or are surrounded by. Whereas people analytics, it's people a lot closer to home. So what kind of person tends to be more interested, or what kind of skills are required to work in people analytics as opposed to CRM and sales marketing analytics?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say probably it's not required to start, but it's something I always say is like, at the end, we need to know about people as well, right? So it is people analytics. So you need to get some background on organizational theory, on psychology, and so on, human behaviors. So these things come to the desk eventually, right? If you want to start driving some hypothesis of what you could test with data, you need to start with the people side before you go to the numbers and so on. So the person interested on working this needs to know that it will get to this place, right? On also understanding how organizations are formed, how performance is managed, how how human behavior plays a role in the workplace. So all these, I think I would say it's the main thing that separates from the other analytics functions, let's say. And other than that, I think on the analytic skills is basically the same. I would say it doesn't really change. And but one thing is like can be scared with access management stuff because this is usually where the complication starts, and is where we spend a lot of our days like defining which users can have access to which data, or how can we share some insights without breaking any sensitivity rule and so on. So it has to be someone that so I see, for example, a lot of people that have worked on the infrastructural side think with identity management systems, for example, thinking on how you define the roles in the organization, which people should have access to what. But these people usually find a good counterpart on people analytics. I mean, we are usually the first use case for these guys. So so it also can come from that place.
Because you came from a finance background previously and evolved into people. If there was someone else looking to take that journey, what would you advise? What would you wish you knew before transitioning into people analytics?
Yeah. Well, my career transitions are a little bit. I actually am a mechanical engineer, right? So it's how that got to consulting, that then got to finance, that then got to people analytics. But from finance to people analytics, I would say it's quite close actually, because a lot of the things there are a lot of overlaps. For example, workforce planning, which is something that involves both financial teams like FP&A teams, for example, and people analytics. I have worked a lot with FP&A teams during my career. So this is something that you usually will find on the FP&A team. You usually will find someone that has been dealing with position management, with how you look at the recruitment process. There is always someone on the finance team that's working with this kind of stuff. And then you have all the good thing is when you come from finance, right, is that you have all the background on business, on financial steering and business control, all this part of how this affects the costs of the for the organization, right? And for many organizations, people are the biggest cost, right? Especially on the tech sector. So it's definitely a relevant discussion on how to manage the workforce. So I would say these are overlapping things. Like you also have some payroll is also an area that usually have both skills, so finance and analytics. And also some people that have been working with payroll have this interest of going into people analytics. And I think the things I had to learn and that I really advise is, again, organizational theory, people, human behavior, how humans behave in the workplace. This is very important. But then also goes into analytics, right? Go into statistics and what are the methods. And the good thing is, like, again, there is no difference from all the other analytics functions. You can learn with someone teaching you how to look at CRM or anything else, and then you can try to apply this into people analytics. I think the methods are exactly the same. So those are things that I think are really valuable to someone trying to transition to people analytics.
Nice. So the hard skills from other analytics responsibilities, they transfer quite nicely, but you really have to have an interest in human psychology, human behavior, and organizational theory. You don't have to have experience in that, but you have to be curious about that area.
definitely. Yeah, that's what will make you bring your insights into action, right? Because into getting the insights, you can probably work without the theory, but then
Hmm.
when you go to discuss with managers what should be improved, or when you are trying to create some hypothesis on what you should test, then you need to go into this area. And yeah, and the nice thing is like this people analytics is a very young function, right? So this is definitely something that's very exciting when you start to dig into. You see that the reference books are from 5 years ago, seven
Yeah,
years ago, something like this. So you see that very quickly you are doing something that's on the edge of what's being done
yeah.
there outside, and that's very exciting, right? Because you can quickly be on like some innovative projects, right?
Absolutely. I think HR analytics, people analytics is the new kid on the block when it comes to this space. Where can it get to? What's on the roadmap? What's next for people analytics?
Yeah, well, there is a lot of things, right? So I think I'm especially interested, and I think there was a lot of new advanced things coming on in terms of internal communication in the company. So like how the networks of people interact between them. I think one company that is like one of the benchmarks in terms of people analytics is Microsoft. And there is a specific reasons for that, because they definitely master all the tools they use on their
Yeah,
workplace, right? So because they basically build all of them, so they are really good at analyzing how the networks of people interact, what are the formal and informal communication nets, right? And this is very, very interesting. And it's a little bit, I would say, still not very practical use for it. Like I
mm,
haven't seen really good use case on how you can design a better organization based on this, but I'm definitely sure it's around the corner. So to come, right? Uh, and also I think there is all the trends that you see in terms of HR, right? On that we have seen during the pandemic, that we have
hmm
seen now with the new relationship of people with work and so on. I think these are all things that people analytics try to understand, right? And try to, yeah, really give tools for managers to leverage the things that are good and work on the things that are not that desirable, right? So I think whatever you see a new HR trend in LinkedIn, be sure that there is someone in people analytics thinking on, oh, how
yeah.
can I measure this? How can I experiment with this?
Trying to double down on whatever's working best. And I guess with the world becoming more and more digital, more and more data being recorded, it's only going to get better and more efficient and more improved. And like you say, the most valuable part of any business is its people. So
Yeah,
the better we get value out of how we spend our time and what we spend our time on is only going to be beneficial for
yeah,
everyone.
yeah. And a big, yeah, and a big challenge of this is as well. This is it's not a new thing, but it's a big challenge is how you measure all this stuff, right?
Mm,
Because measuring performance is not that trivial. Nowadays it's becoming worse, right? Because it's like that you have a lot of creative work, a lot of work is I would say in the past it could be a little bit easier when you had like clear outputs on
yeah,
how much people should get out of their desk. But nowadays you can have people that in a couple of minutes just create something that has a lot of value, right? So how you measure these performance things is something that's really hard, especially on tech companies. And it's something we spend a lot of time thinking on how we would how we would work with it, right? How you measure success, right? And this is definitely a challenge.
To work out why a strong employee provides such value is not an exact science. There's a lot of factors that we need to consider. Like you say, it's not they're a great employee because they do X. There's so many factors that have to be put into the question. We could talk for probably another hour on this topic, but unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Leandro. It's been a great conversation. Hope you've enjoyed today.
Yeah, really cool. Really always happy to talk about people analytics and good questions. I think it's really it got me out of the out to think out of the comfort zone. So that's nice.
And we'll revisit in a year or 2 years about what we said and see if our predictions come true of how the world of people analytics is going to be then.
Yeah,
It's a very, very hot topic.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I hope it keeps like this. I think so. I think it will even grow, and of course, I'm really happy always to jump on these discussions, and I think it's really good for the whole people analytics community, right?
Yeah, it's going strength to strength. More and more people are investing in it. More and more companies are investing in it, and awareness is a key factor of that. Yeah, onwards and upwards for people analytics. Thank you once again for your time. As always, to the listeners, any questions, feedback, let us know. We'll pick some out for future podcasts. Please like and share. This is a platform to give as many people thoughts and opinions of data leaders such as Leandro. But it's bye from us. Thanks once again, Leandro.
Thanks, Matt. See you.
Ciao, ciao.